Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. Today I'm going to tell you a very strange story about a little girl who went missing. Or did she? Before we get started, let's do the housekeeping. If you are not subscribed and you would like to be, please do so. And if you do, please click that bell because you'll be notified when my content goes live. Also, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, share. All of those things help my channel to grow. Okay, let's talk about Pauline, shall we? In April of 1922, a baby, a 2-year-old, Pauline Picard, disappeared while she was playing on her family's farm in the village in which they lived, which was in the region of Brittany in northwest France. That very day, more than 150 people came to help them, and they combed the Picard family farm, their home, the field, the surrounding woods, and the countryside for any signs of the missing little girl. But there was nothing. Pauline's family assumed that she had wandered off from the farm and had succumbed to the cold or been attacked and eaten by a wild boar. Yet it was strange that her body or her clothing, shoes, anything, there was nothing left, nothing found. In the village, there was talk of a chimney sweep that came into the village and enticed Pauline with candy. A neighbor said that she saw 2 strangers who hung around the farm during the time of the disappearance. Yet more stories said that Pauline had been stolen by gypsies, although none had been observed in the neighborhood at the time of her disappearance. The gendarmes and police inspectors in the area spent the next month searching the field, the farm, the countryside, and they found no trace of Pauline. Nothing. She had vanished completely. A 2-year-old. What came to follow was a bizarre case of potentially mistaken identity, and then a horrific discovery of not just 1, but 2 sets of partial remains in a field that had been thoroughly searched. In May, the police arrived at the farm with a photograph of a little girl who'd been found wandering alone in the city of Cherbourg, about 217 miles away. She'd been on foot and alone. She was found abandoned in the hallway of a local home on Rue Coppelle and was brought to a hospice. The little girl was seen a few days earlier in town with a poorly clothed woman who tried to abandon her in a store, but the clerk had chased her down and given the child back. Upon seeing the photo, her parents were so relieved, and they agreed that yes, this was a picture of their Pauline. Her mother burst into tears, saying, "That's my daughter." But how on earth had she gotten so far from her home? Had she been snatched? They immediately took a train to Cherbourg to bring home their missing 2-year-old daughter. But when the Picards first saw the girl at the hospice in Cherbourg, they weren't quite convinced that it was Pauline. The girl had no reaction to seeing the parents, and she was mute. The parents tried to speak to her in the local language, and she appeared to understand nothing that they were saying. The Picards stayed with her, talking, caressing her, and she remained completely indifferent towards them. She did look like their daughter, but she looked like a underfed, malnourished version of their daughter, but she didn't seem to recognize her parents at all. Medically, it was found that she had no issues. There was no reason for her to be mute. She didn't have anything else wrong with her. And the clothing that she was found in, the parents didn't recognize them. They weren't Pauline's clothing, at least not the clothing she was wearing on the day that she disappeared. But her parents were convinced that the girl was Pauline, or maybe convinced themselves that the girl was Pauline after spending several days with her. When asked if they were sure, the father replied, "Of course, she has the same hair, the same blue eyes." So the hospice sent her home with the parents in the hopes that her surroundings would spark her memory and get her talking. The hope was that this girl was just traumatized and malnourished, and that she'd quickly recover in her own home, surrounded by her family and what she knew as comfort. On the way home, the girl is said to have spoken 3 words. Then, upon returning to the farm in which they lived, the little girl's siblings immediately recognized her as Pauline. But the family as a whole seemed to have some doubts to this girl's identity. The girl was said to be asking for bread and calling the family cat in a completely different dialect than which she'd grown up with. Then, at the end of May 1922, a farmer crossing a field about a mile from where the family lived discovered a horribly mutated and decomposing body of a small child, naked, with the head cut off. However, close by, carefully and neatly folded, were the clothes in which Pauline had been wearing on the day that she went missing. The clothes were not scattered around, which indicates that it was someone familiar, possibly, and someone who had taken a lot of care in placing them neatly by the body. The farmer rushed as quickly as he could to the village, and he returned with the gendarmes, the local police department, and he was followed by many inhabitants of the village, including the Picard family, who recognized the clothes as those worn by Pauline on the day she disappeared. The body could not be identified. The face had been partly devoured by foxes, and the body was in the area that searchers had painstakingly covered many, many times in the initial search operation. The head, the hands, and the feet were missing. A severed head was found close by the body. An examination of the remains was done, and the severed head was found to be abnormally sized for a child. So abnormally sized that they looked further into it and later found it to be that of an adult male, which had been partially eaten by the foxes and unidentifiable. Strangely, her torso and stomach were completely intact. And usually, almost always in these cases, that is the part of the body that will oftentimes be eaten first by scavengers, the soft tissue. The medical examiners were unable to state a cause of death. Marks on some of the bones could have been cuts or bite marks from scavengers. Her stomach could be empty because she starved outside or because the people holding her captive just didn't feed her. So the final report stated that Pauline probably froze to death after becoming lost. Somehow, her hands, feet went completely missing, and a man's head was put there instead of hers. But doesn't it seem more likely that someone could have abducted Pauline, maybe then lost her, and then planted a dead body that resembled her? So, following the discovery of what was possibly Pauline's body, the big question was, who then was the girl that the Picards were raising? At the end of May 1922, the lady who had been seen trying to abandon the girl was apparently found. However, it was later discovered that she had a daughter the same age that she had had with her. And it was speculated that the girl's parents maybe had immigrated to America and just left her. In mid-June, the Picards sent the girl back so that she could be adopted. The field where Pauline was discovered was carefully searched when she went missing, so the police focused on the theory that she had been placed there several days later. Although, remember that the search went on for a month. The neatly folded clothes made it seem even more likely that foul play was involved. She didn't strip off her clothes and fold them nicely herself, as anyone with a 2-year-old can probably attest to. And who was the second victim? Where was the body that belonged to the skull that was next to this child's body? Early in the investigation, suspicion fell on a man whose name was Karaman. He was an umbrella salesman. He worked as a farmhand for the Picards, and he had been invited to breakfast the day of Pauline's disappearance. He was said to cuddle her a lot and had been heard telling Pauline 2 separate times that he would find her a good home near another town. At around 1 p.m. on the day that she disappeared, he had been left alone with Pauline and was overheard telling her that she was going to go with him. Police followed the path he would have taken to leave town and decided he couldn't have committed the crime based on the timing. He was jailed and released on May 10th for fraud, but this was not related to her disappearance in any way. Then, another strange thing happened. A middle-aged farmer, whose name was Eve Martin, went to the Picards' home and said that he understood that their daughter had been found. When told that she had, he asked them, "Are you sure it's Pauline?" Then he added, "God forgive me, I am guilty." Then, in wild laughter, he rushed around, ran from the farm, and the following day he was taken to a lunatic asylum, raving mad. And it is thought that perhaps it was him that had killed Pauline. But it is quite unlikely that we will ever know the truth. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you enjoyed this story, or if you are enjoying the 31 Days of Halloween, there's a thank you button below. It's a tip jar. If you want to leave a tip, that'd be great. If you don't, you don't have to. Thank you, and good night.